Frederick Douglass often said he was mixed race, but I don't think it was ever proved that he was.
Frederick Douglass' exact ancestry is unknown, but it is widely believed that he was of mixed racial heritage, with his father likely being white and his mother likely being African American. However, the details of his parentage are not fully known and there is no definitive proof of his exact ancestry. Douglass himself wrote that he did not know the identity of his father, who was rumored to be a white man from the plantation where his mother worked as a slave. Despite the uncertainty, Douglass used his own life story and experiences as a testament to the humanity and potential of all people, regardless of race or background.
People often criticize Douglass for not really mentioning his first wife in his books, despite her being such an important figure in his life.
Frederick Douglass's first wife, Anna Murray Douglass, was a significant figure in his life and his fight against slavery. She was a free black woman whom Douglass met in Baltimore, and she helped him escape slavery in 1838 by providing him with money and a sailor's uniform. The couple married later that year in New York, and they had 5 children together. While it is true that Anna Murray Douglass is not mentioned as much in Frederick Douglass's writings, it is important to note that many women, particularly black women, were not given the same level of recognition as men during this time period. It is also possible Douglass did not mention her as much in his writings because of the stigma surrounding interracial marriages at the time. Nonetheless, Anna Murray Douglass played a critical role in her husband's life and in the abolitionist movement, and her contribution should not be overlooked.
Really, Douglass didn't seem to be that afraid of engaging in controversies in regards to interracial marriage. His second wife was white.
Yes, that's true. Douglass married his second wife, Helen Pitts, who was a white woman, and faced significant backlash from both black and white communities for doing so. He was a strong advocate for interracial marriage and believed that love should transcend racial boundaries. However, even within the abolitionist movement, there were differing opinions on the topic of interracial marriage.
He's also criticized for not teaching his first wife how to read.
It is true that Douglass did not teach his first wife, Anna Murray Douglass, how to read. However, it is important to understand the historical context in which this occurred. In the antebellum South, it was illegal to teach enslaved people to read and write. Douglass himself learned how to read and write in secret, and he risked severe punishment if he was caught. While Douglass was a strong advocate for education and literacy, it was not until after the Civil War that he had opportunity to advocate for the education of his own family. By that time, Anna Murray Douglass had passed away, and he was able to ensure that his second wife and their children received a good education.
Douglass didn't seem to have a liking for Native Americans.
While it is true that Frederick Douglass expressed negative opinions about Native Americans in some of his writings, it is also important to note that his views on this topic evolved over time. In his earlier writings, Douglass expressed some negative stereotypes about Native Americans, such as in his description of the Indian reservation system in his 1879 book, Life and Times of Frederick Douglass. However, in later years, he became more sympathetic to their struggles, particularly as he became more involved in the movement for women's suffrage and other social justice causes. For example, in his speech, The Race Problem in America, delivered in 1890, Douglass spoke about the need for solidarity among all oppressed peoples, including African Americans and Native Americans. He also criticized the United States government for its treatment of Native American peoples and recognized their history of displacement and dispossession. It's worth noting that Douglass's views on Native Americans were shaped by the prevailing attitudes of his time, and that he was not immune to the prejudice and stereotypes of his era. Nonetheless, his later writings and speeches suggest that he became more aware of the need for solidarity across racial and ethnic lines, and that he recognized the value of working together for social justice.
Was Frederick Douglass anti-Catholic and anti-Irish?
Frederick Douglass, the famous abolitionist and former slave, was not known to be anti-Catholic or anti-Irish. Douglass was a devout Christian who believed in religious freedom and tolerance. He was critical of certain religious practices and beliefs, but he was not known to have expressed anti-Catholic or anti-Irish sentiment. In fact, he wrote in his memoir, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, that the Catholic Church was one of the few institutions in the antebellum South that provided some level of support to slaves.
Did Frederick Douglass not like Native Americans?
Frederick Douglass, the famous abolitionist and former slave, had a complex relationship with Native Americans. While he did speak out against the injustices and violence inflicted upon Native American communities by the U.S. government and European settlers, he also believed in the idea of manifest destiny and advocated for the forced relocation of Native Americans to Indian reservations. Some have criticized Douglass for these views, which align with the prevalent attitudes of the time. However, others argue that Douglass's views on Native Americans should be understood in the context of his broader political and social beliefs and his commitment to advocating for the rights of oppressed and marginalized communities.
What were negative characteristics people had about Frederick Douglass?
Frederick Douglass, like many public figures, had his fair share of criticism and detractors throughout his life. Some of the negative traits attributed to him included arrogancy, Some people felt that Douglass had become arrogant and aloof after achieving fame and success as an abolitionist. Egocentrism. Some individuals felt that Douglass was too focused on his own image and reputation rather than on the causes he fought for. Lack of patience. Some people felt that Douglass was too impatient and confrontational, which sometimes hindered his ability to effectively advocate for his cause. Hypocrising. Some of Douglass' contemporaries accused him of being hypocritical, pointing to the fact that he sometimes lived extravagantly, even though he publicly espoused the virtues of simplicity and humility. It is important to note that these criticisms of Douglass should be considered in context, as many of them were made by people who opposed his views and had political motives for attacking him. Additionally, Douglass was a complex figure who had many positive traits, including his bravery, his unwavering commitment to justice, and his inspiring speeches and writing.
Really ill. It is also possible that he figured that he taught himself how to read, so if his wife was interested in reading, she could do the same.
That's a possibility. However, given Douglass' strong advocacy for education and literacy, it's also possible that he simply didn't prioritize teaching his wife to read. It's important to note that during Douglass' time, women's education and literacy were not prioritized, and it was not uncommon for women to be denied access to education. It's possible that Douglass simply did not consider it his responsibility to educate his wife, given the societal norms of the time.
Frederick Douglass has often been accused of adultery. Was there ever any truth to it?
There is no concrete evidence to support claims of adultery by Frederick Douglass. However, he was known to be a charismatic and dynamic speaker, and as a result was the subject of many rumors and allegations throughout his life. It is important to approach historical allegations with skepticism to consider the motivations behind them, especially when they come from sources that may have had a political or personal agenda against the individual in question. In any case, it is always to base our understanding of historical figures on the verifiable evidence in their written works rather than unverified rumors or hearsay.
Really, well, there's a difference between formal education and trade education.
That's true. Formal education typically refers to schooling and instruction in academic subjects like reading, writing, and mathematics, while trade education focuses on teaching practical skills for specific trades or professions. While both types of education are valuable, they have different goals and outcomes.
Abe Lincoln had little formal schooling, but he did have trade education.
Yes, that's true. Lincoln received only about a year's worth of formal education during his childhood, but he was an avid reader and taught himself many subjects through his love of reading. He also received practical training in a number of trades, including carpentry and surveying, which he used to make a living before entering politics. His experience as a surveyor, in particular, helped him develop a strong understanding of the importance of property rights and land ownership, which would later inform his political beliefs.